December 17, 1944, 0530 hours, Hansfeld, Belgium. The Tiger tank coughed, sputtered, and died. SS Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper slammed his fist against the turret hatch. The metallic clang a lonely echo in the pre-dawn dark. His fuel gauge read empty. Around him, the most powerful armored spearhead the Wehrmacht had assembled for the Ardennes offensive, Operation Watch on the Rhine, sat motionless. 67 tanks, 149 half-tracks, and nearly 5,000 of Germany's elite Waffen-SS soldiers were all paralyzed by empty fuel tanks. This was the core of the entire offensive, designated the Schwerpunkt, the decisive point. They were meant to smash through Allied lines and race 65 miles to the Meuse River. But the plan was flawed from the start. Peiper's initial fuel allocation was only 31,000 gallons, enough for just 50 miles of combat operations. To reach their objective, they were betting the entire offensive on capturing enemy supplies. General Sepp Dietrich, Peiper's commander, was blunt. "You will have enough fuel to reach the Meuse if you capture American supplies." They were already behind schedule. The narrow country roads and unpaved lanes of the Ardennes had caused massive traffic jams. Then an unexpected roadblock. A single American intelligence platoon held up Peiper's column for nearly 10 hours. During that delay, the Tiger engines sat idling, burning precious fuel. By the time they finally reached their first objective, the small American supply depot at Hansfeld, Peiper's column had covered only 20 miles and consumed 40% of their fuel. At this rate, they would run dry before reaching the halfway point. Through the morning mist, Peiper's eyes fixed on the abandoned American position. The Americans had fled so quickly, they'd left hot coffee and burning fires. And then he saw it. Lined up like a gift from the god of war stood rows upon rows of jerry cans, thousands of them. Peiper approached slowly, almost reverently. His men began the frantic work of refueling. As he walked among the stockpile, counting, the mathematics were staggering. They had captured 50,000 gallons of high-octane American gasoline. It was enough to fuel his entire Kampfgruppe for the push to the Meuse River. It was, Peiper thought, enough to potentially change the course of the offensive. The Americans had abandoned more fuel in this single, non-primary supply point than most German divisions had received in the past 6 months. One of Peiper's men, Sergeant Wilhelm Hoffmann, found shipping manifests in the depot office. The papers showed this fuel had been shipped from Texas to New York, across the Atlantic to Liverpool, across the Channel to Normandy, and trucked 400 miles to Hansfeld. The journey of over 6,000 miles had taken less than 6 weeks. Hoffmann showed the papers to Peiper. He read them twice, then crumpled them up. He said nothing, but his face went pale. They both understood what this meant. The crushing realization settled over Peiper like the morning fog. If the Americans could afford to abandon such a quantity, if they could leave behind what Germany would guard with entire divisions, then this war was already over. Germany hadn't just miscalculated, Germany had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of its enemy. Just 6 months earlier, Hitler's Minister of Armaments, Albert Speer, had issued a report that should have ended all offensive operations immediately. Germany's synthetic fuel production, the lifeblood of the Wehrmacht, had been systematically destroyed by Allied bombing. The numbers told a story of inevitable defeat. In 1944, the United States produced 1.8 billion barrels of crude oil. Germany, including all synthetic production and captured fields, managed 33 million barrels, less than 2% of American production. The Third Reich was attempting to wage mechanized warfare with horse-drawn logistics. The fuel crisis was evident everywhere on the home front. The Luftwaffe was grounding aircraft. Pilot training was cut from 250 flight hours to just 60. Civilians hadn't seen private automobile traffic since 1942. Gasoline was so precious, the Gestapo investigated the theft of single liters. Meanwhile, America was drowning its armies in petroleum abundance. While Peiper was celebrating 50,000 gallons, Private Ernst Kara found a stack of American Stars and Stripes newspapers in the depot office, dated just 2 days earlier. The headline celebrated the opening of a new fuel pipeline from Cherbourg to Verdun, capable of delivering 300,000 gallons per day. A single pipeline was delivering more fuel daily than Peiper's Kampfgruppe would use in the entire offensive. The American logistical network was an industrial marvel beyond German comprehension. The Red Ball Express, a massive truck convoy system, was delivering 12,500 tons of supplies daily. The operation itself burned more fuel than the German Army Group B received monthly. Furthermore, Operation Pluto, pipeline under the ocean, had laid pipes across the English Channel, pumping 1 million gallons daily from Britain. By December 1944, Allied forces in Europe were consuming 7.5 million gallons of fuel daily, while receiving 8.2 million. They were accumulating reserves while fighting. The sheer scale was astronomical. The U.S. First Army alone had 3.5 million gallons in reserve. With the captured 50,000 gallons, Piper's columns surged forward. But even as they drove, the disturbing truth emerged from captured American maps. The Americans had fuel stockpiles everywhere. Piper pushed his spearhead toward Stavelot, the site of a major American fuel depot. Here was their biggest prize, over 2 million gallons of gasoline. If they captured this, they would guarantee reaching the Meuse. But as the first German vehicles approached, Captain John Brewster of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion was already at work. His orders were simple: deny fuel to the enemy at all costs. The depot held 2,189,000 gallons stacked across 15 acres. At 16:30 on December 17th, as Piper's advanced guard neared, Captain Brewster gave the order. Engineers poured gasoline trails between the stacks and distributed white phosphorus grenades. The explosion was immediate and tremendous. Within minutes, the entire depot was an inferno. Piper's lead tanks arrived to find a pillar of black smoke rising 1,000 feet into the sky. The fire would burn for 3 days, consuming enough fuel to have powered Piper's entire division to Antwerp and back. Piper stood on his tank turret watching the flames. For 5 minutes, he said nothing. Then he climbed down and stated, "They can afford to burn 2 million gallons to deny them to us. What are we doing here?" Across the Ardennes, Americans were destroying fuel dumps rather than risk capture. At Tuapan, 1.1 million gallons burned. At Spa, 2.5 million gallons were destroyed. In total, Americans deliberately destroyed over 8 million gallons during the first week, more than Germany had allocated for the entire operation. The realization that they were fighting an enemy who could burn more fuel than they possessed was a morale killer. General Hasso von Manteuffel of the 5th Panzer Army later wrote, "When I learned Americans had destroyed 8 million gallons, rather than risk our capturing it, I knew the offensive had failed before it began. The German retreat was a slow-motion disaster. Tanks were abandoned with empty fuel tanks, not from battle damage." By December 19th, the fuel crisis was critical. Piper's remaining fuel, perhaps 8,000 gallons, was enough for one engagement or a retreat, but not both. The logistical contrast was total. When the Allies needed to resupply the besieged garrison at Bastogne, American C-47s flew 316 sorties, delivering 160,000 gallons of fuel. The Americans were flying more fuel to a single surrounded outpost than Piper's entire Kampfgruppe possessed. When General George S. Patton's Third Army was ordered to pivot north to relieve the Bulge, the redeployment required 350,000 gallons of fuel. This move, considered impossible by German standards, was accomplished in 3 days. Then came the clear weather on December 23rd. Allied aircraft flew 2,000 sorties. P-47s consumed 300 gallons per hour. B-26s burned 200 gallons hourly. One day's air operations consumed more fuel than Germany's entire offensive allocation. On the night of December 23rd to 24th, Piper abandoned his vehicles and escaped on foot. Of the 119 tanks and assault guns that began the offensive, only 39 were left, all immobilized. They were destroyed with remaining ammunition. Millions of Reichsmarks of equipment were destroyed by empty fuel tanks. The numbers that circulated through the German command were the final damning evidence. Field Marshal Walter Model's chief of staff recorded his reaction to the reports of captured and destroyed fuel. Model's comment, "We are not fighting the same war." The American logistical advantage was not incremental, it was biblical. Calculations later showed that in December 1944, each American soldier was supported by 67 pounds of supplies daily. Each German soldier received 3 pounds. The American forces surrounding Piper on December 21st had a combined fuel allocation of 340,000 gallons for that single day. Piper had perhaps 1,000 gallons. The Kampfgruppe Piper had advanced 60 miles, captured several depots, and discovered the truth. The 50,000 gallons they captured at Hansfeld, which had seemed miraculous, was less than a single American armored division consumed in 2 days. It was a rounding error in Allied daily consumption. During the Nuremberg trials, German leaders consistently cited logistics, particularly fuel, as decisive. Field Marshal Keitel testified, by 1944, we couldn't move forces for lack of fuel, while Americans moved armies like chess pieces. Today, in the small museum at L'Église, a monument to that impossible discovery stands. It is one of Piper's Tiger tanks, still positioned where it ran out of fuel on December 23, 1944. In 1984, a German veteran, Karl Wortmann, stood beside the tank with a former American soldier. The American, Roy Anderson, said, "We always wondered why you stopped. We thought it was tactical." Wortmann laughed bitterly. "We stopped because the tanks were empty. You burned millions to keep it from us. How could we fight that?" Anderson was quiet. "We never knew you were that short," he admitted. "We had so much we never thought about it." That exchange captured the truth of December 1944. One side measured by the gallon, the other by millions. One side fought for each jerry can, the other burned oceans. Piper's discovery at Hansfeld was not just about more fuel. It was the realization that American abundance operated on a scale that made German scarcity irrelevant. The war was over when American industrial capacity mobilized. The Tiger tank sits there, its fuel gauge empty, a monument to when tactical excellence met logistical reality and lost. The war was ultimately won by factories and refineries, not brilliant generals.